Let's start in the East. We've got the 1 seed Miami Heat against the 8 seed Atlanta Hawks. And my initial thoughts here are that this is a pretty lopsided series. I think Trae Young is one of those players who can very much completely carry a team to the point that he could feasibly win a series single-handedly against just about anyone. I'm not sure that there's a better player in the NBA right now at figuring out what a defense is doing and in making those in-game adjustments on his own and completely torching that same scheme in the second half in a way that can't be adjusted to as a counter adjustment by that same defense. That said, if you're putting together a team that can stop Trae Young, you want a great point of attack defender who can also switch and body up against bigger players on those switches. You want a great wing stopper who can switch on to Trae Young and stick with him. And you want a great defensive big with mobility. Well, Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo. I don't think there's a single better team in the NBA that is designed to stop Trae Young more than the Miami Heat are.
Yeah, maybe Toronto might come close. That would be the only other team that
I don't think they have the super switchable, defensively overpowering big.
I feel
because
like
Bam is mobile enough to play that drop coverage and guard both the lob and Trae's floaters, and that's what Toronto doesn't have. So this feels like the nightmare.
It's just out of control. Yeah, I won't tolerate it.
Fair. This feels like the nightmare matchup for Atlanta.
I do agree, and it doesn't help that Atlanta has been trash on defense for a lot of this year, especially with the live ball issues that they've had. We also have to see John Collins is dealing with a right foot injury. I actually don't know. He would certainly help as an offensive safety valve. I don't really know what he would add to this series for them that much. Now, Clint Capella is dealing with the left knee issue. As we're recording this, we know nothing about that other than the Hawks are optimistic that it's not serious. That could mean any number.
It feels like he'll miss at least a few games, though.
And ultimately, I do think, I mean, you named it with the defensive, like the way that Miami's defense matches up with Trae Young. And it's just the only like semblance of hope you would have is that because the Heat switched so much, like, can he punish them in any way for it? It's like he can't because Bam exists. And that's just, Bam might be even more important than the other two because of what you can't do against him. And so I do think that increases the importance substantially of like a Kevin Herter or a Bogdan Bogdanovic, guys who you now need to probably make more plays offensively. But the Heat just have so many other talented defenders on their team. You're going to get to a point where they take away like not just the Hawks like primary weapon, but like their first, second, and third options on any given play. And that's terrifying. I guess if there is like a reason for optimism, I don't know that Miami is, their offensive numbers on the season were fine, but we have so little data on the Bam, Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry pairing. And with Butler and Bam, but not really taking threes or long range jumpers at all, the Heat actually have a below average offense when all three of them are on the court together. Their defense is so incredible that it doesn't matter. They are very reliant, though, or have been, on some killer bench units. And then I think this is where the importance of Tyler Herro comes into play for them. People can quibble, argue, hate his shot selection. And he does take some pretty bad shots, but a lot of the times it just feels like those are the shots he almost has to take because when he's on the floor sometimes it shrinks. Like he probably has more room to operate when he doesn't have both Bam and Jimmy on the court. And so if there's a saving grace for Atlanta, if you can get your defense set, maybe that gives you a fighting chance. But just like you've been so bad in that regard all year. And without Capella, it probably gets even harder. I really do like Onyeka Okongwu, though. And
great instincts around the basket.
And he's someone who could help a lot in this series. It's just you start to run out of, if Clint Capella is not available and Collins isn't available, oh, we're out of bigs. Hi, Gorgie Jang. Like, no, that's not the answer.
That is definitely not the answer. I think the offensive concerns get mollified a little bit if Atlanta has a consistent secondary shot creator. It doesn't. I think Bogdanovic is the natural pick here as the X factor for the Hawks, simply because he can fill that role. We saw him fill it in the second half against the Cavaliers.
And
But
he has been pretty good. Well, from what I've seen, and then the numbers will back this up. He's been really good since the Collins.
yes, and he's got the pull up jumpers and he can create for himself, but you don't want him doing that over the course of a full game, much less a full series. And even when he does, it's not really done in a way that involves everyone else. And if you're not having everyone clicking on all cylinders, you need Trae. And if you're taking Trae out of the game, what's the answer here? So I struggle to come up with an offensive strategy for Atlanta that's going to yield enough points, even against a diminished Miami offense.
They've I don't even know if this helps because you're ultimately not going to win this series by winning the minutes Trae Young doesn't play. But Bogey, the offense has been great when he plays without Trae, and the pairing between him and DeLon Wright just seems to work. And so if
the DeLon Wright minutes against Cleveland,
what was he, a plus 24? I think
he might as well have been a plus 80 because Nate McMillan should not have taken him out of the game in the second half and allowed Cleveland to come back in.
Yeah. So, and the pairing between him and Bogey has just worked. When those two are on the court without Trae Young, I actually think, I haven't checked the numbers a little bit, they've annihilated opponents during that playing time. So that helps in the sense that if you can tread water without Trae Young, I still don't know how to figure out the Trae Young minutes, especially when the two most familiar threats for him at the 5 position right now might not be playing. Him and Onyeka Okongwu will be fine, but like there's a difference with the connection with Clint Capella, and then also John Collins. One of the things I don't think people have talked about enough is when you had Capella, he couldn't be the primary screener all the time. And he was billed as this like just screen and dive guy. He does so much more, whether it's relocate, he's hitting threes, like he has this little bit of a floor game there. So they will miss that. That would have been another element, at least, that made their offense more dynamic, even if you don't love the fit with him and Capella on the court at the same time. I wish I had an argument that would make me say this is more than a Heat sweep or a gentleman sweep. But
I think like Trae is good enough that he might just be impervious to any defensive efforts at this point in a 7-game series because he is so good at making those in-game adjustments. So I think the case you can make is that he has a couple 40 pieces in his bag and steals a few games.
And look, it helps that they do take care of some of the low-hanging fruit on offense where it's, no one turns the ball over less frequently. They do get to the foul line at a pretty good clip, although I don't know how much losing their 2 primary bigs is going to hurt that for them. You hit it right on the head with the secondary creator stuff, though. And is this could this be like a Gallo series because he likes to operate at such a slow pace and Miami wants to slow things down for you when you're they want to be disruptive, obviously, but and they're third.
I feel like a Gallo series though is like a couple of 12-point halves. Like we're not going to see a 35-point Gallinari game.
I feel like when I'm watching Gallinari, I'm seeing like 25 years into the future of Luka's career. They didn't have the same trajectories, but like Gallo right now is what a 40-year-old Luka would.
I can kind of see that. But also like this, even if the tempo suits Danilo Gallinari in the series, I don't think the matchups do because he's usually at his best. Yeah. He's usually at his best in offense, but he's like on a switch, posting up a smaller guy. Okay, like, do you really want to run that against Kyle Lowry or PJ Tucker?
No, probably not. So is there a chance? Well, let me ask you this question. The game is close. What is Atlanta's closing unit?
It's probably Trae, Herter.
Oh, okay.
I think Trae, Herter, Bogdanovich, Gallo, and Capella if he's available, because you need the offensive options against this Miami team. I'm so low on DeAndre Hunter right now.
Look, he blew by Montrezl Harrell in that first playing game. Okay,
amazing, truly astounding.
Is there any scenario, and if Capella is not available, what are the chances? Obviously, Okongwu then, if you want to play with big, what are the chances that everything we talked about, where it's the Hawks are just like, we need to lean into the offense, so we're gonna go nuclear, and like this is Gallo at the 5, and this is not something I'm basing off of anything that I've seen because I think I've seen Gallo play the 5 like once, if at all, and I actually feel like I'm dreaming that up right now that ever happened this season.
So we're gonna see some Gallo, PJ Tucker 5 minutes. That would be something. I think that hinges on both Collins and Capella not being available.
And I guess in which case that's really not nuclear. It's, hey, we prefer this to. I mean, they could bust out Jalen Johnson too if they wanted to.
I hope they do.
Look, I'm just saying this is clearly a large enough sample size. 46 possessions with Gallo at center this season, and the Hawks are a plus 12.6 points per 100 possessions with a 132.6.
You found the answer. Hawks in 5.
Done. Who is your? Oh, the other thing I wanted to ask you is who's. Well, let's go to the X factors first. So, who's your X factor for Atlanta? You have Bogey.
Yeah, it's got to be Bogey.
I
think you can make a case for DeLon Wright, but probably less so in a series that you have to find offense.
Mine's Bogey too. I did force some variability later on in the podcast. I don't feel about doing bad about doing that. However, I will say, if you had to pick someone else, DeAndre Hunter is kind of an X factor here because you need DeAndre Hunter to be at the very least better defensively overall. Even if you're not worried about Miami's half court offense, just like you just lost Clint Capella. Is Onyeka Okongwu now your best defender on the team right now or in your rotation? Or DeLon Wright? Sorry, I feel like there's a lot of
Gallo at the 5.
Or Jalen Johnson at the 5 with Gallo at the 4.
There you go.
And bench Hunter all. But my point is the fact that you just didn't have Hunter in your closing lineup, that's a pretty big issue.
Yeah, it is. There are a lot of pretty big issues in this series.
Here, let me give you my X factor I already gave you my X factor from Miami, so let me give it to you. I think it's Tyler Herro, just because of the limitations I mentioned that we've seen on the half court offense so far. What's really interesting, and part of this has been, or a major part of this has been health. We just don't have a ton of data on what he looks like playing beside Miami's 3 stars. And is that something when you get into close games in the playoffs, are you going to put Tyler Herro alongside 3 of them? Or are you so worried about him being exploited on defense that you don't play him? And are the Hawks a team? Like, can they even do that? Like having bogeys, does that on offense, if we know they're not worried about Trae Young, and Miami's going to do things like off-ball switching that's just going to make it so that you really can't maybe go after Tyler Herro, but perhaps they can be like, that's something that they could go after if Miami goes to that unit, which they've done for sub 250 possessions this season. I just looked it up, and it's been a disaster, by the way.
My pick is also Herro for largely the same reasons. I'll add 2 big picture thoughts. One is that the criticisms that he receives for taking so many difficult shots, I think, are just a little off base in general, as they are for a lot of players who take tough shots. No NBA offense generates easy looks every time down the floor. Someone has to take those shots. If he's good at them, he should be taking them. Ideally, he gets easier looks as his career continues to develop, but the fact that he's already comfortable taking and making those is an unmitigated positive to me. And the second point is he's up for a max contract extension soon. We've talked about that before on previous episodes. And so far we have a 2-year postseason sample. In 2020, he went nuclear. That was in the bubble. In 2021, he couldn't hit anything in that first round loss. 31.6% from the field, 31.6% from 3. And he did make all his free throws, but that's not saying too much when he only took, I believe, 7 of them. So where is he going to fall on that postseason spectrum as he continues to develop? So even beyond this individual series, I think it's really important for Miami in general that he gets off to a good start.
What's your prediction for this series?
Heat in 4.
So
I don't even think Trae can steal a game against this specific defense.
The follow-up questions to that is, one, do you see Victor Oladipo making an impact here at all? Or do you think that he's been like, some of his shooting splits have been really good over the past however long it's been. I thought about him as an X factor.
It just doesn't look good though right now. Like I don't see that explosion. I don't see him creating open looks. So I struggle to see that happening in the playoffs in particular.
Yeah, it was just a thought. He's like, I think I can't remember what the filters were, but he was shooting like an astronomical percentage from the floor, but the team stats are not great. The Heat their half-court offense is barely league average when he's on the court this season. And he hasn't even played, and they're being outscored by 3.9 points per 100 possessions overall. And the offense is in the 13th percentile when he plays overall. The follow-up to Herro, by the way, really quickly, it's not like he's looking off of Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry for all these looks either. There are a lot of lineups where neither of them are in there, or he's with one of them, and that just changes the the context of his offense. I was going to ask you who you thought was more likely to get swept since you didn't do the podcast with me, the Bulls or the Hawks, but I'm guessing you think it's the Hawks over the Bulls.
I think it's the Hawks.
I'm going to say Heat in 5, and maybe the concern, maybe everything we just talked about with their offense won't matter. Bam was on fire to finish the season. Miami just feels like they weren't last year, but this just feels like we said this at the beginning of the season was almost one of our concerns was, are they just a postseason team? Or are they going to be on cruise control throughout the regular season? And their defense is just, it's hellfire. And so I do think Trae's good enough to get you a game. And I like what I've seen from Bogey enough to where I just feel like, okay, maybe. But even Miami's bench has been so good this year. So perhaps that means I didn't predict a sweep for anyone. So I'll change my Bucks in 4, Heat in 5. Those are my new adjusted picks.
Am I allowed to wear a Hawks hat on another episode at this point? Or did I lose that privilege?
I don't know why you're not wearing one during this episode for anyone who's watching on YouTube.
I thought it would be weird to be wearing it when I made that prediction.
That's fair enough. Well, if they win a game, we'll have to record immediately after on whatever that game is so you can wear your Hawks hat.
Fair enough.